Thanks for pressing play. This is the Pirate Street Journal. 3 topics from business, tech, enterprise software, and the consumer, all through a category design lens. 10 minutes per topic, 30 minutes total. I'm Bree Clark. With me is Eddie Yoon and Christopher Lochhead. Hey ho, let's go. Today's first topic, Pirates, is the AI category's catastrophic marketing failure and why people are throwing Molotov cocktails instead of throwing parades. The second topic is SpaceX going public, the biggest IPO in human history, which is estimated for mid-June. And the third topic is the race to go public between OpenAI and Anthropic. And they're right behind them, pricing higher, growing faster, and pulling in OpenAI's founders. Category queen versus category queen. We're live today on Friday, May 22nd. Let's get into it. Topic number 1, AI's marketing F. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, gave a commencement speech at the University of Arizona last week. He compared AI to past technological revolutions. The graduates booed him. And the bad part is what's happening off stage. In April, a 20-year-old in Texas allegedly threw a Molotov cocktail at Sam Altman's house. A few days earlier, someone fired 13 shots at the front door of an Indianapolis councilman who just approved a data center. 13 rounds at his front door, a note left under the doormat, and a plastic bag that said no data centers. His 8-year-old son was sleeping inside. And in Missouri, voted 4 city council members out of office 1 week after they approved a $6 billion data center. 60,000 Americans are in Facebook groups organized against data centers and roughly quadruple what it was in December. 48 projects worth $156 billion got blocked or delayed in the last year, and in a national NBC News poll, AI is now polling less popular than ICE, less popular than Trump, less popular than politicians. The only thing less popular than AI is Iran and Democratic Party. Meanwhile, the technology itself is curing diseases, accelerating scientific discovery, and driving a measurable share of U.S. GDP growth. The greatest technology in human history being marketed like a horror movie by the people who built it. So, Christopher, in your view, is this a marketing problem in the AI category? Can they fix it? Have they already lost the framing war? And what would a category designer do different starting tomorrow? 10 minutes starting now.
Thank you, Bree. Yes, this is going horribly. The AI category leadership gets an F. The media gets an F. And the politicians get an F. Only the technology industry, Bree, could take the greatest innovation in human history and let this happen. And in a very real way, we wrote this book, Creator Capitalist, to try to get out in front of this, to try to explain to people that AI was the greatest innovation in human history, and the people who make the transition from knowledge worker to creator capitalist are going to be the most creative, most innovative, and most value-creating humans ever. And this should make people incredibly excited. And so how is this possible? Well, the reason it's possible is, look, it's profitable. The Wall Street Journal recently wrote a story called "The American Rebellion Against AI is Gaining Steam." It's profitable. People pay attention to this stuff. Bad headlines get a lot of news. The other people who get an F, and this one makes me really furious. We know for a fact that many of the layoffs being attributed by CEOs and CFOs to AI are bullshit. They're actually cutting costs, laying people off, and using AI as air cover. There's a lot of smart people who think AI is going to create more jobs than it displaces. Who knows? We'll know in time. But here's what we do know, Bree. Only the tech industry could take the greatest single innovation in human history and market it so badly that people are protesting in the streets. Imagine what has to be going on in your head to throw a Molotov cocktail at Sam Altman's house. AI has the potential to cure diseases, accelerate scientific discovery, expand creativity, and be extraordinary. Now, do we have to have guardrails? Absolutely. Do we have to be critical? Absolutely. Do we have to be thoughtful? Absolutely. Do we need great governance and transparency? Absolutely. We are not just fanboys of everything tech. No, of course not. And here's the last piece. The Luddites are always wrong. The Luddites were against so many things. Actually, when I did some research on this, I couldn't believe what things were protested. Electricity was protested, automobiles, factories, recorded music itself was protested. Of course, the printing press itself, television, and I've been around long enough to remember the internet protests. And literally, they were wrong every single time. And so enough with AI companies marketing job takeout, enough with the media, and enough with the CEOs. And we need to be thoughtful about the potential downsides of AI, have rigorous conversation about it, absolutely, and put the emphasis on the right syllable, which is if you make the transition from knowledge worker to creator capitalist, you are going to be one of the most powerful, innovative, value creating people ever. And this is the part that breaks my heart, Bree. This is the part that makes me sad. These people protesting data centers are robbing themselves of their future, and they don't even know it because they've been manipulated by the media and by all of this undue influence. It's dumb. People need to think for themselves on one hand. And on the other hand, in some ways, you can't blame some of these people because of what the politicians and the media and the CEOs have done to them. But it's time to think. And those people who are out there protesting, if they put down their protest signs and got a Claude account and started creating, would create a future for themselves that they're not going to have running around with their signs and signing online signing online protests and so forth.
I think we also need, I think, so yes, and amen to all of that. And I think the hope would be that someone from the technology industry, one of the great CEOs out there, would lead the charge. And I think kind of tell the truth on both ends of the spectrum, because there's a bit of this whole, the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I do think that it is telling that
Can you
labor
just
force
say that one more time,
participation,
Eddie?
people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that there's the real reality is that the vast majority of these tech CEOs, for as much money and innovation they've made on the smartphone and everything else, do not let their own children spend much time on iPads and smartphones and this and that. And this is correlation, not causation, right? But all the things that I see on the consumer side, the percent of US adults that were married in the 1960s was 75%. Now it's 50%. Birth rates were 3.5 in the 1960s. Now it's 1.6. And then you'll appreciate this, Christopher. Even teenage drinking, I've tried alcohol, was 75% in 97. It's 42% now.
Well, here's the thing. As a
So,
matter of fact, it's funny you bring this up, Eddie. I was talking to a buddy of mine about this yesterday. So young people's consumption of alcohol, I believe this is correct, is if it's not at the lowest level ever, it's certainly close. And again, I double check me, but I'm almost positive the Kinsey Institute has said that we're at the lowest level of sexual activity with young people
yeah.
ever. And
And
there is a correlation.
well, and all of these things, again, the correlation that you're getting at is it is the introduction of the smartphone. And I think there's a reckoning to come with it. I'm not saying that people aren't, absolved of their own personal responsibility and everything else like that,
Yes,
but
but for the smartphone, young people would be drinking and having sex.
and
I
getting
never thought
married
we'd get to a point
and having
where
children.
20-year-olds don't want to get drunk and screw. There's
Well,
the famous song that you probably don't know the song, Bree, Jimmy Buffett. Why don't we get drunk and screw?
I
well,
know that song.
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
the scariest part to me of all of these things, and these are all kind of interesting, is that labor force participation among young males, 15 plus, was 75% in 98, and it's 68% now. So it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but two-thirds of young men over 15 are working. That's not right. There's something odd that's going on. And the really scary part is that GLPs may make it worse. The point being, they're getting more effective. They're migrating from shots to pills, right? And what appears to be the case is that it doesn't just dampen appetite for food, it dampens appetite generally speaking, right? And so I think we are
So wait a
there.
minute. You're saying that GLP-1s make people less horny, Eddie Yoon?
Make them less, it lowers the zest for life, it would appear to be, right? And so I'm not sure where all of this goes, but whether it's the tech CEOs or the pharma CEOs have to acknowledge that, the good old saying that we always have is today's solutions become tomorrow's problems. And that we have to acknowledge the fact that young people today do not have the life that they are excited about going forward, whether it's because of the smartphone, because of GLPs going forward, or because of these other changes that are going on. And that until we kind of sit with them and say, look, your American dream is not what you thought it was, and that doesn't feel good, that might be the necessary step for somebody to, quote, feel their pain, a la Bill Clinton, to lead to the next step, which is very exciting, which is 43% of Gen Z plan to start a business in 26 versus 39% of millennials
That's
and
amazing.
21% of Gen X.
By the way, before you go here, I
57%.
have a
Well,
new
I got,
category
I,
idea, Eddie. Hold on, just before you get off the GPL1s and the sex. New category idea. You ready? It's a pill that's a hybrid of a GPL1 and Viagra.
could be,
1 minute, one
well,
minute.
that's only you, right? But 57% of Gen Z workers are running a side hustle versus 21% of Gen Z. And here's the best part is that the Gen Z entrepreneurs are 5x more likely to say that they would not have started their entrepreneurship journey without AI. And so it
How
is
great is
possible,
that? That's incredible.
but we have to go through this journey of acknowledging the fact that life is not the same for them as it was once for us, that there's real pain and struggle that's going on, and that until they can feel fully their anxiety, which is hopefully not expressed through Molotov cocktails and violence, that we can't get to agency until that they actually feel understood and heard.
Yes, and there's also a couple of things that are true. I don't have the data right in front of me, but I have read reports recently that some of what we're being fed is actually not true, that the millennials are on some financial metrics doing better than Gen X or boomers. And by the way, boomers and their parents went to World War II. So whatever they're going through right now, way less difficult than having to land at Normandy.
All right, all right, all right. Topic
Not
2.
quite empathy, but it's true.
It's called tough love. Heavy on the love and heavier on the tough.
Quick break, pirates. Everything Pirate Eddie just said about the consumer, he's been saying things like that for 20 years across McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, and now Category Pirates. Everything Pirate Christopher just said about category design, he literally wrote the book on it. 3-time public company CMO, co-author of Play Bigger. Now imagine both brains on demand for your business, your career, your next decision. That's the Pirate Eddie bot and the Pirate Christopher bot, trained on every Category Pirates mini book ever written, every super consumer framework, every creator capitalist take, and every category design playbook. You ask, they answer, in their voice with their lens. They come with the founding tier on Substack, alongside the full mini book library, the audiobook library, digital copies of all 7 of our big books, and every Scooby snack we drop. You can find it at categorypirates.news/subscribe. Now let's get back into the next topic. All right, topic 2, SpaceX going public. So, for years, the most valuable AI companies have been running what we'd like to call private IPOs, tiny clubs of insiders, the rest of us watching from the cheap seats. And that era is beginning to end. SpaceX filed its S1 on Wednesday. It's targeting $80 billion in the raise, $1.75 trillion valuation. Estimated to be trading sometime around mid-June, lots of June 12th coming out. So, for context, the previous IPO record was Saudi Aramco at $29 billion. SpaceX is targeting close to triple that. The S1 contains a mind-boggling number. SpaceX is estimating its total addressable market at $28.5 trillion. Its GDP is $32 trillion. SpaceX is pitching a TAM almost the size of the entire American economy. $26.5 trillion of that is AI. And that's not even the only mind-boggling number on their S1. Anthropic is paying SpaceX $1.25 billion a month for compute through May of 2029. Roughly $45 billion total. That contract alone is bigger than SpaceX's entire annual revenue today. And here's where it gets a little wild, gentlemen. Anthropic is on track to do $10.9 billion in revenue in Q2, more than double last quarter, and post its first ever operating
You
profit.
just said $11 billion in the quarter.
To do 10.9. Yep, $11 billion
That's
of revenue.
11. When you do marketing math, that's 11.
Got to round up here. We're doing some strong fact checking on this end of the internet here in Pirate World. So they're posting its first ever operating profit of about $559 million. After paying SpaceX, the Mag 7 is about to become the Mag 10, maybe more, Mag 11, Mag 12 on its way. And public markets are about to do what private markets refuse to do, which is let millions of regular people own the future of AI. And the governance, we can talk about that. Musk holds 85% of the voting power, and his pay package vests on building a colony of 1 million people on Mars, which sounds like a joke, but it's not. So, Eddie, when private companies stay private this long, who is actually winning?
Well, it will be interesting to see, because, on the one hand, there are a few people that you wanna bet against than Elon Musk. And on the other hand, the history of IPOs is that a lot of people, especially retail investors, get hurt in IPOs, right? They go out with a bang, and then, as the lockup expires, they sell stock, and, people who are not as sophisticated, tend to get hurt with it. So it will be interesting. I think we'll see this kind of drama play out. I heard June 12th is the date that they're looking to go out. So this is a very, very near term thing. And that there's, again, there's kind of more than one thing can be true, is that you believe that the TAM, if you believe, it, the TAM being roughly the size of the US GDP is just a apt comparison, because I think the only comparison that I could have of what SpaceX is trying to do is say, if you had a chance in Europe to invest in the new land in America, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Because everything we're talking about is, would you like to invest in space? That's kind of the category, right? And so it's one of those things where it's so huge, even if it's wrong, it's still going to be ginormous. And yet, at the same time, there's, the money has to come from somewhere, that they will be included in the S&P 500 index. That's one of the things that they fast tracked. And so kind of stuff needs to be sold to be able to buy SpaceX to be included in it. And so it'll remains to be seen kind of what happens with the market for all of this. And so I do think that obviously the private investors who got in early are going to do great. They're going to be some, traders who trade the IPO that are going to do great. There are going to be some retail investors that hold for the long run. They should do great, all things being equal. But there are people who are, if you can't spot the sucker at the poker table, you are the sucker. There's probably going to be some people trying to make a quick buck that are going to be hurt, because that's kind of the history of IPOs.
Now, if you look at the non-obvious that's going on here, it's quite interesting. So what's Starlink, right? Elon Musk is the founder and principal shareholder, to the best of my knowledge, in Starlink. What's Starlink? Starlink is fundamentally premised on physical infrastructure for delivering the internet is a giant pain in the ass. It's very expensive. It takes a long time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what if we could move the internet to space? Well, per our last conversation, if, let's just call them, and say this with love, donkeys are going to protest data centers on Earth, well, F it. We'll build data centers in space. And so, as crazy as that might sound to others, the non-obvious thinking, aka the strategic problem, aka the premise of Starlink, and what can be done here with AI data centers in space, is very similar. The other thing that's important to underscore here is there's two kinds of investors. There's people who invest in past performance, who are essentially betting that the future will be a continuation of the past. That's why Warren Buffett likes Coke and Mrs. C's candies, because he thinks in 100 years from now, people are still going to want Mrs. C's candies. And I think he's probably right. They're pretty damn good. So Buffett bets on things staying the same, and those are the kinds of businesses he's in. There's nothing wrong with that. He's one of the most successful investors, if not the most successful investor of all time. And there are companies that are their market cap, their valuation is based on potential. So one of the things you see Musk doing here is he's declaring that SpaceX has the largest, greatest category potential of any company ever created. And when they go public, we're going to find out how many people beyond his current set of investors agree with him.
Well, and it's one of those things where, up to this point, Tesla was the only publicly traded vehicle to invest in the Muskonomy. Now they're going to be two, which might become one if the rumors are true that SpaceX will buy Tesla. It becomes really
Well,
complicated. But
let me ask you that, Eddie. What's the likelihood that once he gets public and has a liquid stock, that he will start buying up his other companies and create the, let's just call it AIGE, for lack of a better analogy?
well, he signaled as much as saying like, all my, what did he say? All my exes are ending up in Texas. He talks about that. He said that,
One of the
you
greatest
know,
songs of all time, actually.
convergence it seems to be, kind of the natural flow of where things are going. So he has pretty much hinted that that's what he would like. He notoriously hates earnings calls and dealing with, the whole dog and pony show. So I can't imagine that going from 4 of these a year to 8 is a good idea for him. And so now there are complications. There are some part of SpaceX that is government oriented, that has restrictions that, and Tesla has a huge business in China. So there's some hee haw that's in the realm there. And then the scuttlebutt is that Musk is going to, A, he wants to do this, and B, he knows he needs to do this before Trump leaves office. Is kind of the scuttlebutt. So the midterms will play a role in this because it just seems like if the Democrats win the White House, that you know there'll be lots of hee haw from you know a merger perspective and antitrust or whatever, even though they're wildly different. Now the the complexity, I feel bad for the equity analysts doing the research on this because Tesla for a long time has been a car business with a software business with a robots business and probably 9 other, you know, uh, it's like some people have called it the world's greatest venture capital portfolio of bets that are there. So now, to your point about the Starlink, which if you ever had experienced Starlink on a plane, oh my gosh, you almost never want to fly any other plane that
No,
doesn't
it's
have
it's like
Starlink
it's like
because
experiencing the Lord.
yes, yes. You have that. Starlink is coming to your phone, right? So no more drop calls from AT&T and this and that. Like they're coming after all of that spectrum. You talked about
And
data
oh, by the
centers in
way, when you have
space.
Starlink, if you're in the most remote parts of planet Earth, you can still communicate with the rest of planet Earth.
Uh, we talked about data centers in space. There's the thing that I'm dreaming for, which is that if he gets Starship to work reliably like air travel, it will replace air travel because you go up into near space and you come down, you can get from Santa Cruz to, Singapore
Chicago, or
in
more
30
more more
minutes.
importantly, Hawaii.
Hawaii,
How
my
fast can I
goodness.
get to Hawaii?
It might be 5 minutes. I don't actually even know how that would
And
work,
it would
but
it be
like
like a roller coaster ride? What's that roller coaster called? Or that ride that goes straight up and
the
straight down and just sort of freaks you out and tries to give you a concussion? Is it gonna be
I
like that,
imagine
Eddie?
I you know it might be one of those airbags required, right? And so I'll have the extra double
Bring
bag
your
there, but
helmets, bring your helmets.
But,
absolutely.
one of the things, and I think this is important through the category design lens about this whole discussion, about this. One of my favorite Far Side cartoons of all time is a picture of 2 guys standing in front of a horse-drawn carriage and these flaming arrows coming down all around them. And one guy's looking at the other guy, and the caption underneath it says, "Hey, they're lighting the arrows on fire. Are they allowed to do that?" And that is category design. That is innovation, right? And so we have the amount of innovation, whether it's coming from Musk or elsewhere, that is happening right now on planet Earth is extraordinary. And the people who are going to be the most successful are going to be the people who light the arrows on fire.
Well, and I think partly what gives me hope about what Musk is doing is not the valuation and what the stock does for SpaceX, is that he has explicitly said that his goal is not wealth creation, it's not to buy a mega yacht, it's not anything else. His goal is abundance for humanity. And that, you know, if planet Earth was plan A, SpaceX is plan B. In the event that we screw up planet Earth, he wants a base on the moon, he wants a base on Mars. And so whether or not people believe it, I hope it's a race between, can Musk deliver on his promises of abundance? Because if we are able to do this, or if SpaceX is able to accomplish what it is, then everything becomes cheaper at some level. And that if Tesla is able to achieve its mission, if they merge, you know, everyone will have a human robot. Traffic goes away. So there is a world of abundance that's coming, and the question becomes: can the abundance occur faster than the flaming arrows get sent up?
I think the answer to that's going to be yes, and there's going to be some dislocation on the way.
Great timing. All right. Topic
Did we
3.
stay did we stay in bounds so far?
Yeah, you're staying
All
right in
right.
bounds.
Let's see if we
Yeah,
can
let's
keep
keep
going.
rolling. 3 for 3 today. On topic 3, OpenAI versus Anthropic in the race to go public. So, 2 days after SpaceX filed, OpenAI is signaling that it's filing pretty soon too. Their target filing as early as today, Friday, May 22nd, but the financial press is bearing that the IPO might not be ready until September. That's 4 months from now, which is a lot of time for the story to change, and the story is already changing. OpenAI's last private valuation was $852 billion. Less than a year ago, they were at $300 billion. They're tripling on the way to the public market, and the company that started as a nonprofit research lab to quote unquote benefit humanity is about to be one of the largest IPOs in American history. Sam Altman has been pushing for this. His CFO has reportedly been pumping the brakes. And meanwhile, Anthropic is in talks at $900 billion, which is higher than OpenAI, and they just posted Q2 revenue of $10.89 billion for the fact checkers and $11 billion for the marketing people. First profitable quarter in company history, and the talent is voting with its feet. On Tuesday, Andre Karpathy, founding member of OpenAI, former Tesla AI director, the man who understands languaging better than most everybody, as he literally coined the term vibe coding, announced he's joining Anthropic. Earlier this month, Ross Nordine, a founding member of XAI, also joined Anthropic. And as we've talked about, Anthropic itself was founded by OpenAI defectors. So here's the question hanging over the whole IPO season of the next year. And everything we've ever written, the data shows that the category queen takes 76% of the economics. Everyone else shares 13%. OpenAI has been the category king of generative AI since ChatGPT launched. But for the first time, a rival is pricing higher, growing faster, pulling in the founders, and growing public on a slower clock. So, between now and September, the market has to answer a question it's never had to answer before. In a category this big, is there room for two category queens? Or is one of these companies about to get re rated hard before it ever rings the bell? So, Christopher, Category Design 101 says the queen takes 76%, everyone else is 13. Is OpenAI still the queen heading into September? Or is Anthropic the new queen and OpenAI is the prince that just doesn't quite know it yet? Or is AI actually big enough that the old rules don't apply and there's room for two?
I love this question. Okay, couple key points. Number one, most people conflate being first to market with a product and being first to make a category tip with your design. And by design, I mean frame, name, and claim a problem that positions a solution that is generally viewed to be new and different than the past. So it's not first to ship, it's first to tip. Now, that said, there's another very important nuance, and it's a giant, it's a Grand Canyon size nuance here. So what really happened? You had two people leave OpenAI, a brother and sister combination, to start Anthropic, in part because OpenAI was primarily focused on the consumer in the AI space, and they became the fastest growing company in world history. And generative AI, which they launched, if I'm not mistaken, Bree, in November of 2022, became the fastest growing category in history. Here's what happens. Dario and his sister leave because they see a different problem that because of the incredible growth and success of OpenAI, OpenAI can't get to. There's also rumors that they had arguments with Sam. Who knows what went on internally? But here's the important thing. OpenAI was primarily focused on scaling the consumer generative AI. Dario and his sister said, I see a different problem that is a missing that OpenAI either won't or can't get to, and that's called focus on the developer. And what their premise fundamentally was, what developers need specifically is different than what consumers need broadly. And they were right. Not only were they right about that, they were further right that if you think about this as a domino effect, that the developer was the first domino in taking over the enterprise AI as distinct from the consumer AI. So what we actually have going on here is not a battle for the same thing. This, if you look to your history, has happened before. And here's when it happened. The birth of the PC. Apple versus Microsoft. Ultimately, what do we have? Two $4 trillion companies. They used to be fierce competitors, and they do compete in certain areas today, but they are more frenemies. Why? Microsoft owns the enterprise and Apple owns the consumer. That's not 100% true. There's blurring in between, like I mentioned, but that's what happened. And so there is a scenario that says these are two different categories. And yes, are they going to compete? Yes. Did Sam say we got to go chase OpenAI? We got to go chase Anthropic? Absolutely. Are they going to fight for the developer? Absolutely. But here's a likely scenario. OpenAI was the first to make consumer AI tip. They might continue to own that market. Anthropic was the first to make developer AI and now enterprise AI tip at scale. They might become the Microsoft. OpenAI might become the Apple. That's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's important to understand this is how the landscape changed. This is why fundamentally they left OpenAI to create Anthropic. And so we could have a likely scenario here that will play out like it has in the past.
Yeah. Where I think that analogy is perfect in that what needs to be true for that to actually work is, if you think about the magic triangle, I mean, this is my view of things is that both Anthropic and OpenAI have worked very hard on the product side of the triangle. Neither have done really, in my opinion, the work necessary to be done to make that future true, where it's incremental and not overlapping on the company breakthrough side. And on the category side as well, too. I mean, there's still some work to be done. I know OpenAI hired Johnny Ivey, right, to build some hardware for them. Supposedly there was some scuttlebutt about the Apple ChatGPT partnership fraying because of like, why are you going into hardware and stuff? But it's exactly what OpenAI needs to do. Is that the logical step let's play your thread out, Christopher. If OpenAI is going to double down on the consumer, you're going to need consumer devices. You know what? And the real problem
Which is
is,
exactly why they brought in Jonathan. I mean, they
yeah,
didn't bring him in to create a new enterprise carbidingulator, I'm assuming.
yes. Well, and some of the things, so there's a hardware component to it. There's also, I have to say, like what Tim Cook has done on the privacy side with Apple, they're going to need to address that. Like that is an open wound, and the lack of trust, real or not, the perceived trust is an issue that they need to fix, and that they're going to need to take a hard stand on for the sake of the consumer in order to prove that to be the case. That's on the category side. Is that, if you think about where, using AI as your therapist is one of the great use cases.
It's
I
number
can't
one as
imagine.
far as I know with ChatGPT,
Yeah,
therapist, friend,
and
coach,
what's going to happen when you can get deposed and they can, get
and they
your AI,
can.
and they can right now. And so OpenAI, if you're going to stay with the consumer, you have to make the consumer's problems your problems, and they haven't quite done that just yet on the hardware side or on the category side. I would say that Anthropic is, it feels like they are closer on the developer side, but I do think a B2B, a B2C split could work very nicely, but there's a lot more work to be done in the magic triangle. And, I mean, the logical thing that I would imagine, if the other analog is Amazon, right? Of, how they went so quickly at books and losing all this money until eventually they got to AWS and Marketplace and the other things that are wildly profitable, is that, in my opinion, the switching cost between LLMs is way too low. Like, we switched from Lucy and ChatGPT to Claude, like, just like that, and they're designed to do
Well,
that.
and the minute Claude came up with their, I forget exactly what they called it, but their we'll suck in the ChatGPT shit for you, easily press a button and Bob's your uncle. The minute that happens, because, in the past, what caused users to stick was the UI, relearning a new user experience, right? In this case, the UX is a prompt.
Yes.
The other thing, there's two other important things. Do you want to say something, Eddie?
Well, it just that they and the difference in the UX is meaningful. Windows versus iOS. Like, things are on the
Correct.
left. It's like driving in the UK versus
And
driving
so
in the
now
US.
switching costs are zero because we can suck in the data and the
Yeah.
UX, there's no learning curve on the
Yeah.
UX. Now, there's two other things I think most people are maybe not quite seeing here. So when you look at mega categories, So AI is a monster mega category, the biggest one ever created. So think transportation or think healthcare. And if I say transportation, we all understand what an airplane is. That's a subcategory, or an automobile, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what's happening here? I think, and again, things might change, but here's a lens to consider. Let me say it that way. What Anthropic is indicating is that a more focused, a more niche down AI is powerful. So they gain their momentum with the developer, and by being, I'm not going to say 100% purpose built because that's not accurate. We find Claude amazing for writing and content creation, superior to ChatGPT today. But let's just start there. And so, what does that indicate for the future? AI is not one category. It's going to be like transportation or healthcare with thousands of subcategories. The other thing we see happening as a likely, highly likely scenario, and frankly, I see this through some of the startups that I have helped advise. We're moving from what you might call LLMs, large language models, to SLMs, small language models, or NLM, niche language models, right? Where a company, for example, there's a company that I'm working with that is focused primarily on financial and data governance, right? As an AI company. And so that's an area of expertise that they're focused on. And so I think what we're going to see, just like we saw application specific vendors show up in the early internet days, before that, the client server days, and then after that, the cloud days, we're going to see vendors focusing on niche use cases. And some of those niches will become mega categories. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's another mega battle going on for the consumer that could change everything. A new category that you might call, and I don't know if it's going to be called this, but a new category you might call personal AIs, where you have one AI that knows your calendar, your emails, all of your communications and all that, and it sits on top of everything and is your partner in dealing with all of that. Now, some of this functionality is already coming out, of course. However, people are going to gravitate to wanting to buy this from a mega vendor like a Google or an Apple. And right now, Google is incredibly positioned to be the leader there because of not just search, but remember, they have your email in Gmail, and that connects to the calendar. And so there is a likely mega category battle coming out now between Apple and Google for who owns the personal AI category.
Yeah. Well, and just to finish up on that point, what Google has done nicely is their Fitbit or not Fitbit, the what's the big one? Who's the market
The
leader?
Whoop?
The Whoop competitor, right? That's much cheaper and everything else. They have Waymo, right? And so I just think that's
Watch Apple or Google buy Aura Ring.
yes, yes. To me, the consumer healthcare, like going back to the GLP discussion, is that somebody should buy Eli Lilly. Somebody should, like the idea that you can only solve this through tech, I think is silly.
So
And
does
that if
Google buy Eli Lilly?
well, they could, but like it, and maybe they don't have to, but it is one of these things of like, the unintended consequences of some of these GLPs. The agonist, now that I correct my language on it, is when they become more effective, there are unintended consequences, and you probably need. I mean, some of these people. If I were Sam Altman or Sundar at Google, I would start picking up legacy physical assets, things that affect the consumer day to day, things that you put in your mouth, things that affect your weight, things that affect your health. Somebody should pick up our buddy Carl Dakeler's Beachbody business, all of his fitness content and his Shakeology nutrition. Like you need a full solution to actually deliver on the promise of a better life for the consumer. And it cannot simply be just a chat bot.
Hard one to end on. So much more we could say. We'll see you next week, pirates. And that's the Pirate Street Journal, the non-obvious from the obvious. If this gave you something to chew on, do us a favor and give us 5 stars wherever you're listening. And if you want to keep the conversation going, head to categorypirates.news/subscribe and become a founding subscriber. You get the Pirate Eddie bot and the Pirate Christopher bot, so you can jam on your business and your career with us anytime.